Howdy, partners! Welcome to the Haunted Chronicles, episode 128. Last week's show on the Sunshine State is available in the on-demand section of paramaniaradio.com. Tonight's guests are Tony Spera and Frank Chiafari of the New England Society for Psychic Research, which was founded by Ed and Lorraine Warren in 1952. Tonight's episode is again sponsored by An Evening with Annabelle on September 10th, which is sold out, but a new date has been added on October 29th, and we'll find out about that soon. Please visit warrens.net for ticket information. Well, Brock Burrows has a birthday today, and he's at Chuck E. Cheese jumping around in those colored balls, and hope he's collecting lots of tickets so we can get a little plastic lizard or something. And Jennifer Jigglypuff Runyon is out on assignment investigating the creepy clowns of the woods of Greenville, South Carolina, which brings me to breaking news. Breaking news. All right, this is some clown news because you people really like clowns. At the edge of the dark woods in South Carolina, children have been telling adults that a group of clowns have been trying to lure them into the trees. They say the clowns live deep in the woods near a house by a pond there. This is not fake news. It's a real report that they've been coming in to the sheriff's office in Greenville, South Carolina this week. Several children said the clowns were offering them money to follow them into the woods to a house close to the pond. The police have investigated the house and have found no evidence of clown paraphernalia. That's their exact words. I didn't even make that up. Haunted Chronicles public service announcement. Do not go into the woods when lured by clowns. Thank you. We're not only entertaining, but educational. And these are all the groups that shared the event page this week. Thank you to Paranormal Billboard, Edge of Fear, Realm of the Unknown, our friends from the Demon Files, Paranormal Planet, Electric City Paranormal, Big Bear Ghost Seekers, On the Fringe with Art Bell and Heather Wade, Interviews from Beyond, Ghosts and All Things Paranormal, Appalachian UFO Research Society, Independent Paranormal Research Society, UFOs, Paranormal and Government Agendas, and FemForce, Warriors of the Paranormal. Thank you all for sharing the page again. And you know what? Let's get to Frank and Tony. Frank Chiafari is a singer, songwriter, and musician, and has been with the New England Society for Psychic Research for over 25 years, I believe. And Tony is the director of the group that was founded in 1952 by Ed and Lorraine Warren. Tony, Frank?
Hey, how are you?
Hey, fellas.
Good to be here.
How are you?
Good, Tim. Nice to speak with you.
Hey.
We're good. We're good.
Ask how I am.
How are you?
Oh, I'm happier than a chubby whistle pig frolicking about in a barrel of candy apples and candy corns.
That's pretty happy.
It's really happy, if you can imagine that.
Yeah.
So, first I wanted to mention, we've been talking about An Evening with Annabelle. I've been talking about it for 2 months now, and it's sold out.
Yeah.
And you have a new date added, and can you tell us what happens at these events?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, this is Tony. We can tell you, Frank and me go to these things and put them on, and what we do is we bring 3 artifacts from the museum, from the Warren's Occult Museum, with us to display at this event, this banquet facility. And also what we normally do now, lately, we bring a surprise artifact that no one knows what it's going to be. we advertise that we're bringing the Shadow doll, the Conjuring mirror, and the Annabelle doll. But then there's a surprise artifact that we bring, and it's usually different every time we bring something. We bring a new item. And the reason why we do all this, and we show a couple of videos. One is a video of the museum tour itself, an actual video tour of the museum. And then we show a segment on Annabelle itself. We have a big buffet dinner from an Italian restaurant banquet facility that we are at. And we talk about different things about the supernatural and the paranormal and how to protect yourself. We go through all of that. And actually, Frank and I sing a song. Frank sings a song dedicated to Ed that he wrote back in the 90s, I believe, called Spirits on the Hill, which Ed wanted him to write a song about Lorraine and him. And Frank will tell you more about that later. But then we sing that, and we sing another one of Ed's favorite songs together. Frank and I sing it. So it's almost like a party. But it's a party, but it's an educational type of a thing too. And the reason, Jimmy, is why we do it at the banquet hall is because we can no longer give private tours at the museum because the zoning department got a complaint from a neighbor on the street and shut us down, told us that you're not zoned for that. You can't have people come in for a guided tour because it's not zoned commercially. After all of these years,
always somebody.
One neighbor didn't like it. We don't know exactly who. We have an idea who it is. And as soon as they called zoning came out, and then they sent us a letter to cease and desist. So we couldn't even show any artifacts anymore. People were just hounding us on emails and, can I see the doll? Can I see this item? Can I see the museum? The best I could do at this point was to bring several artifacts to a banquet facility and to show it to them and to talk about these items and show them a video tour of the actual museum. But we're looking into getting a new place, actually, as we speak, Frank and me, a new location that's going to be commercially zoned, and it's going to be really great.
Wow. And I know one house that's going to get egged this year.
Yeah.
Talk to me later about that.
Yeah.
Who is that?
That is funny.
It is. And Frank, we were going to mention the passing of Gene Wilder anyway this week, and Frank, just by coincidence, I saw you posting pictures with you and Gene Wilder. Could you tell us about how you met him and your relationship?
I knew Gene for about 10 years now, and in the beginning our relationship was just professional. I'd go on his property and watch his house burn and leave, and he would wave to me. And then after a few years of that, he started inviting me to his house. I played guitar at his birthday parties. He'd have parties, tea parties, invite my children and my wife, and we got to be really, really close. A friendship that I will always honor forever. Really, the guy was a great, great man. Really, no ego about him at all. You felt like a star when you were with him.
My brother-in-law did work in his house, and he said the same exact thing as you. Like anybody I've ever heard from said he's the nicest guy they ever met.
Yeah. I remember one time I said, Gene, I'm so honored to have you as a friend, and he gave me that look, and he said, "No, Frank, it is I that is honored to be friends with you." And he meant it, And I go, wow,
yeah.
That doesn't get better for a celebrity to say, really. No ego.
Oh, it's incredible. So, I wanted to know first, everybody wants to hear about Annabelle, but first I wanted to hear about if either of you had experiences in childhood that you considered paranormal.
Frank, you can go first.
In childhood, I had an extreme fascination for the paranormal, probably like you and Jim, Tony, anybody that's been in this business. I've always had an interest. I can't say that I had an experience until I was about 17 years old. When Jim, maybe you heard the old hag syndrome.
Yeah.
Phenomenon. I've had that happen to me in the middle of the night when I woke up. I lived in Queens, and I had that where you can't move, you get paralyzed.
Right.
And I turned around, and as soon as I turned around, it's never happened since, I actually saw an old hag. It's like the weirdest thing, standing right at the foot of my bed. and it lasted for about a second and a half. I was never more petrified in my life. And then years later, I read about it in a book, and it said it is actually a fairly common phenomenon that people have this, and they call it the old hag syndrome. And I didn't know about that at the time, or I'd say it was a self-fulfilled prophecy or something, but I didn't know about it. It was, and it was extremely, to this day, I researched it because I want to know what the heck that is. And I was awake. I wasn't sleeping. I actually saw it.
Did you tell your parents about it, or you just kept it to yourself?
I never told them because they were like old school Italian people who would never, they would scoff at it.
See,
I kept it to myself.
See what happened to me. It's not about me, but I have to tell this quick story. Everyone's heard about my story when I was a kid, and the radio started changing stations, and the thing threw my legs down on the bed, and I went running downstairs to my mother and said, "Ma, there's a ghost in my room." And she goes, "No such thing as ghosts. Go back in your room."
Right.
So I should have pulled a Frank on that one.
Yeah, you see, it just gets discouraging and frustrating.
Yeah.
But the other thing, the biggest thing I said, my wife and I, when we first got married, we moved to a little apartment in Elmont. It was an underground apartment, and that was the first time I actually started seeing shadow figures, and first and only time. I mean, they were like all over the place. You'd see them like every few weeks, and I didn't know what it was in the beginning, and I didn't know my wife was seeing it. And one day, it passed us, and we both looked at the same time, and I go, "You saw that?" She goes, "Yeah," and I go, "What the heck are those things?" I really wasn't really too keen on it, knowledgeable at the time. This was like the early, like the 80s, 85, 86. And now I know, what they are, but at the time I didn't know, and weird things would happen in that place. We finally left after about 4 months.
Wow.
But that was pretty interesting to me.
And did it only happen in that house, or did it follow you to other locations?
No, I never had it since. We heard scratching in there. I mean, it was like weird things would go on. Water would go on. It was really a definite haunted house, I would have to say. When you start seeing things visually, you know that the phenomenon is getting stronger and stronger. And, years later, little things, obviously, if we want to talk later, when I went with Ed and Lorraine cases, I mean, then I saw some fantastic things. But that was stuff on my own that led into.
Right. And Tony, how about you?
Actually, Jim, no. I mean, I haven't had any not as a child. Not as a child. As an adult, yes. Working with Ed and Lorraine, of course, yes.
Actually, that's kind of cool, because tell everyone how you became associated with the New England Society for Psychic Research.
Yeah. Well, I used to be a police officer way back in the day, and I was sitting in my cruiser one evening, and just sitting looking out at the street. I was in like an industrial park looking out at the street, the main road. And a car went by. It was a station wagon, and a beautiful young lady was in the car, and she smiled and waved at me and went by real fast. So I'm like, whoa. And I couldn't even get a chance to wave back, that fast. And so I just put it in drive and followed her in the cruiser. And so I pull into the strip mall, and I pull in, and by the time I pulled in, she had already gone into a dress shop. I saw her walk in. So now I pull right in front of the dress shop, I'm trying to figure out, does she know me, who is she, and all that. So I pull up in front. She comes to the window. She sees me in the cruiser, and she gives me this really weird look, like almost like scared. And I wave at her, and she gave a quick wave, but not a happy wave, turned around and went back inside, deep into the store. So I drove away. I said, well, I don't know what that was all about. So I drove away. And then about 5 minutes later, another police officer who was working that night calls me on the radio, and he says, "Hey, Tone, can you meet me at such and such a location?" So I went and met him. I pull up next to him, and his name was Al. He goes, "Hey, did a woman just drive by and wave at you and smile at you in a station wagon?" I said, "Yeah, how did you know?" He said, "Well, she was looking for me. She thought you were me." So I said, "Oh." I said, "That's what it was." He goes, "Well, I'm not going out with her or anything. You want to meet her?" I said, "Yeah, sure, I want to meet her." He said, "Okay, I'll arrange it after we get off tonight." So it was actually before we got off. It was about 9 o'clock at night. She was getting out of work at the dress store. She worked at the dress store, and I didn't know it. And so I met her at fast food place with him, and I talked to her, and then started to go out with her. I asked her for a date, and she said yeah. So we started to go out for a while. Then about a month into the dating process, she says to me, "Hey, do you want to go see my folks lecture at University of Connecticut tonight?" And I said, "What are they, college professors or what?" She said, "No, they're not college professors. They're lecturing at Jorgensen. They're the Warrens, the ghost hunters." I said, "Oh, you're kidding me." But she had a different last name than than the Warrens, because she was married prior. So I said, "Sure, yeah, I'd love to," and I knew who they were, because I was always interested in the occult. And when I say the occult, I was more into astrology. I used to try to make my own sign up and everything for the zodiac, and read about astrology books like by Goodman and things like that. But I wasn't into the haunting part of it, but all that stuff intrigued me. So I went to Jorgensen Auditorium. She brought me into the green room in the back. I met Ed and Lorraine both, and we hit it off right away. And of course, I kept dating her. And then she said, "Let's go out. Let's go over to their house for dinner." And I would pick their brains, especially Ed, about all his experiences. And I was like a skeptic when I started, like most people are. I said, "Ed, do you really believe in this stuff?" He laughed. He said, "I've been doing it for so long. Of course I believe in it." And he started to tell me all about the hauntings and about demons and devils and human spirits and all kinds of things that he's investigated. Because when I met him, it was 1979. He had just come off of 3 years off of Amityville. He just investigated Amityville in 76. They had a lot of famous cases. Lindley Street in 74, Amityville, a lot of different big profile cases that they had already come off of, West Point. So he kind of laughed when I said, "Do you believe in ghosts, and tell me about it?" I was like, "Tell me about ghosts, Ed. Come on." So it was fun,
Yeah. And you also, aside from your events, do you have some online courses? Can you tell me about those?
Yeah. Well, Frank kind of came up with the idea of doing it because I was getting so many emails. "Hey, do you teach any classes? Can we come to your class?" We're kind of busy. Kind of hard to, and you can only teach a few people at a time. Say we had 20 people, So you teach 20 people a week. It's not a lot. So Frank said, "Why don't we do a video course? That's the thing today, and put it on your website. And we'll just charge a small amount of money." So what we did is we came up with, so far, 2 lesson plans that we have on the Warrens.net website. It's the first one is Earthbound Spirits. We talk about for an hour about different kinds of spirits that are earthbound and why they're earthbound. Earthbound spirits are basically human spirits, and we talk about why they remain earthbound, the reasons for it. And then the second, it's a fundamental course, and the second is devils, demons, and inhuman spirits. And we talk about an hour on that also, on how to recognize a demonic spirit, the difference between a demonic spirit and a human spirit, why they're dangerous, how do you know they're more powerful, and why are they more powerful? How do you combat them? How do you recognize them? How do you deal with them? And so we go into all of that. That's our second lesson. And we're going to go into a lot of other lesson plans, like we may do a whole lesson plan on spirit photography, on EVPs. We may do a whole lesson plan on equipment, things like that. And so we're happy about it, because what we want to do is, after we get 10 plans, 10 lessons under our belt and out there, and people take all 10, we're going to send them a certificate of completion from the New England Society for Psychic Research that Ed started. So it'll be a formal type of a document saying that they learned the fundamentals of paranormal research. So when they go into a haunted location, they're well armed and know how to handle the situation. Because the shows you see on TV today, they don't arm any. They don't give knowledge. They don't impart information to people that they need when they go in. Everybody seems to go in. They don't even know if they're dealing with a human or a demonic spirit. They're just like helter-skelter in there, you know what I mean? And walking around not knowing what they're doing and what to do and how to solve it. So that's why Frank and I put this together, to give them the real skinny on how to do it, how Ed did it, and how Lorraine did it, the right way to do it.
Yeah.
And this is old school, the way Ed and Lorraine taught it. Now, you have something in common. You took some classes with Ed and Lorraine years ago. I remember that, right?
I started right about the same time you did.
Yeah, we go
Jimmy
back a long time. I don't know if people know that or listening.
Yeah, Jimmy goes back way back. What do you go back to the 90s, right, Jim?
Yeah, 91 or so.
Yeah, that's right. That's when I started.
What were you, about 12 or what?
Yeah. It took 25 years to create this show.
Yeah, Jim was one of the other founders, actually, ladies and gentlemen.
He's in a no, Jim was there.
He is, because there's not a lot of people out there that know how to investigate the paranormal and learn from the best. And the best was Ed and Lorraine. And Jimmy was one who learned from the best. And he took a lot of classes and went on a lot of cases, so he knows a lot about the paranormal. Whereas these people, I'll guarantee you right now, that anybody on television, no matter who they are, did not know as much as Jim knows about paranormal.
Right. And you know what the coolest... Sorry, thank you very much for that. The coolest thing about those classes were Ed and Lorraine would, show us a private audio recording interview with a case from beginning to end.
Right.
And pick it apart. And that was my favorite part.
Ed really was into it more than you can even imagine, because you know how, say you like to, like Frank, say you like to play the guitar and you play it a lot and you enjoy it as a hobby. But say you go over someone's house at 7:38 in the morning, Frank is not usually playing the guitar. But when you used to go over Ed's house for breakfast, I'd walk over, he's reading a book on the paranormal at 8 in the morning. No matter when you went there, and I'm talking after 30 and 40 years in the business of doing it, you figure he's kind of burned out. But no, he had an insatiable yearning to know more about the universe and about the paranormal realm. But he always used to say to me too, "Hey, we don't have all the answers. No one has all the answers. If anybody says they do, they're crazy, because that's part of the mysteries of the universe. God doesn't want us to know everything right now, but we hack at it. We pick at it. We get a little information here and there." But he used to read like you would not believe. He probably read 1,000 books on the paranormal, besides going on thousands of cases and speaking with hundreds of clergy, hundreds of paranormal researchers, hundreds of scientists. That's why I call him a demonologist, and I don't call myself a demonologist, even though there are people who took Ed's courses that call themselves a demonologist. I don't like to do that because, and I'll tell you why, Jim, I don't like to do it. Even though I could say it and get away with it easily, I don't, because it's like going to China and going to the best karate school in China and the best master karate man and learning from him and spending 15 or 20 or 25 years learning everything you can from him. Would you call yourself a master just like him, or would you say you're his student? I would say I'm his student. He's the master. He knows more than I do. So I knew and know that Ed knows more than me and Frank and you put together. So why would I call myself a demonologist? Put myself on the same level. I'm really not. I just can't bring myself to say I'm as good as Ed Warren. And I know because I know I'm not. I know I'm not.
There are other people on TV, I won't mention names, that do claim themselves to be demonologists, and I laugh. I say, no, nothing personal. You know your stuff, but you're not a true demonologist. They learned from Ed a few classes. There's some people that literally took about 5 or 6 classes, and now they're experts on the paranormal, which I have to laugh at that.
Right. I mean, because Frank is absolutely correct. Because, going on 100 cases is good, right? But 5,000-6,000 cases, living in a haunted home from age 5 to 12 like Ed did, reading thousands, not 10 books, not 5, not 20, thousands of books, speaking with college professors, with Satanists, with witchcraft people, with everybody to learn, with cops, with everybody to learn more information. Right there, on-the-job training, besides all the stuff he read. I can't fathom it, I've been on hundreds of cases, not thousands. Thousands of cases. Like, some people say they've been on 12,000 cases. I read one time. A guy who, at the time he was in his 40s.
12,000? Wow.
How can you have 12,000 cases? You'd have to do 2.5 cases a year for 29 years. So it's like, what? So you can't make up stuff. But Ed did go on a lot, because I remember I used to call him up and say, I'd call him up at like noon. Hey, Ed, you want to go for lunch? Then I got to go on a case today. Almost every freaking day, you had to go on a case.
You know what?
Go somewhere. Right, Frank? Remember?
Yes, constant. Yeah, always. I charged the punch you took it.
No, I remember. I was trying to tell people, like, we'd have a class on Monday, and then we go to, like, visit one or two houses sometimes later that evening, and then go to another house on Wednesday, and that was just me. So God knows what you guys were doing. Anyways, it's time for break. When we come back, we're going to hear all about Annabelle, the haunted doll. This is Mr. Haunted on the Haunted Chronicles, talking to Tony Spera and Frank Chiafari. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Haunted Chronicles, home of your guaranteed halftime shout-out for chatters in the chat room. Thank you for coming tonight. Corey, Frankie B, Rick, Scotty, Eric, William, James, Cheryl Carter, Dead Dude Chad, Dr. Dave, Indy Dwayne, Maggie Renee, Nicholas Benedict, Squatchy, Tiffany, Kara E, Max, Mark, Vicky, Heidi G, Debbie, Jane Doe, Randy, Brian Hayes, Desi, Paul, Kevin, and Terry Viking, and assorted other unnamed guests. We're talking to Tony Spera and Frank Chiafari. Guys, I've heard so many wrong stories on the internet about Annabelle, and we want to settle it once and for all. What's the true story about Annabelle, the haunted doll?
Okay, the true story of Annabelle is this. First of all, it's probably the most dangerous object that we have in the museum by far. That's why it's housed in a glass enclosure and nobody can touch it. Even though we do bring it to that event, it never leaves the portable glass case that we leave it in. But let me tell you the story. Back in 1970-71, there was two nurses that lived in Hartford. They were nurses from Hartford Hospital. And the mother of one of the nurses gave this Raggedy Ann doll, just a plain old Raggedy Ann doll, to her daughter, a nurse, Donna, for a birthday present. So she gave her the doll, and Donna liked dolls, so she was happy to get it. Donna was about 27, 28 years old at the time. And she used to just take the doll everywhere she went, like inside the house. She would sit next to it on the couch, bring it to the breakfast nook, talk to her all the time, because she was kind of a large doll, almost like a child. And they even bought her a bracelet, like a little gold bracelet to put on her arm, on her wrist, to make it more realistic. Well, everything was fine, no problems. But what started to happen was when they came home from their shift at the hospital sometimes, they would find that the doll was in a different either location from when they left it, or the doll's arms or legs would move a little bit. In other words, they leave the doll on the couch with the legs uncrossed. They'd come home, walk in the door, the doll would be sitting on the couch and the legs would be crossed. And it happened several times. And finally, Donna says, somebody's trying to mess with us. It must be the superintendent or somebody must be coming into this house, into this apartment, and playing games with us. Something's got to be going on. Why don't we do something to find out if a superintendent or somebody's getting in here? So what they did is they took like a little piece of plastic tape, scotch tape, put it on the bottom of the door inside or outside the bottom when they left. And then they would move the rug a certain way, so the rug would move as soon as you open the door. They come home, nothing was moved, the tape was intact. They open the door, the doll moved. The doll's now in the bedroom, for instance, instead of the couch. Then they'd start to find these pieces of paper underneath the table, like in the kitchen table, on parchment paper, which they did not own any parchment paper. And on the parchment paper, written in pencil, would be little notes. The notes might say, help me or help us. And that kind of freaked them out a little, too, because they knew no one was getting in the house. Well, they let it ride for a little while. They said, who knows? We don't know what the hell's going on, but they didn't pay too much attention after that. They just tried to let it drop, figured it'd go away. But one day, they were sitting at the breakfast nook with the doll, talking to the doll, having coffee, when suddenly the two flimsy Raggedy Ann doll's arms levitated onto the table of the breakfast nook, both arms at one time, and just landed on the table like she was ready for breakfast. Now, that doll has little flimsy raggy arms that you can't manipulate, and they don't move on their own, but yet they moved and landed on top of the table. Now, if that were me, I'd be a little freaked out. Even who I am, I'd be a little freaked that happened. But for some reason, they weren't. They were more intrigued that the doll's arms moved than they were frightened. And the other nurse said to Donna, hey, you know what? She's probably trying to say something to us. She's probably trying to tell us something. I know a psychic medium that could probably get the answers to what's going on with this doll. Why don't we have a seance? And Donna says, okay, why don't we? Let's find out once and for all what's going on. And they did. That night, they called in a psychic and had a seance and a round table thing. The psychic goes into her trance and says, I'm getting the name Annabelle, who was a 6-year-old girl outside your apartment who was killed in a car accident. That's who's in the doll. She's residing in the doll right now, Annabelle. So now the girls are believing the psychic, what she's saying, and they're believing that they're dealing with a human spirit inside of a doll, which, of course, is poppycock. That's not true. God would never allow a human spirit to inhabit, especially a little girl, too, but a human spirit to inhabit an inanimate object. But they didn't know that. So one day, and they were treating her like a real person now. Now they were convinced that it was a doll, as though it was a person, not a doll. One day, Lou, with the fiancé who was sleeping on the couch next to Annabelle, she was sleeping on the she was sitting on the other end of the couch. He was sleeping on the other end. He wakes up with a start. He jumps out of the couch and he says, "Man, did I have the worst nightmare in the world?" And he's like rubbing his neck. And Donna was there, the fiancé, and she said, "What's the matter, Lou?" He said, "I just had a crazy dream that crazy doll there was crawling up my leg and trying to strangle me to death." And he was like sweaty. He grabs the doll off the couch when he said it, threw the doll across the room and said, "That's just a Raggedy Ann doll, couldn't hurt anybody." When he did that, as soon as he did that, 7 psychic wounds or slash marks appeared on his chest and on his stomach. 4 on his chest, 3 on his stomach, with the blood coming through the red blood coming through the white T-shirt. Now the girls were frightened because they knew, when they saw that, they knew that wasn't a 6-year-old girl doing that. They didn't know what to do. They were beside themselves. And they called the High Episcopal Canon in Hartford. It's like a bishop. Called the High Episcopal Canon Richard Nolan in Hartford. And he said, "You know what, I don't know how to deal with something like that. Why don't you call Ed Warren? He knows about that kind of stuff." And that's what they did. They called Ed. Ed came out to the house, to the apartment in Hartford, spoke to the girls, found out what was going on. An exorcism, though, by a Catholic priest, though, was performed in the house to rid the house of any evil spirits, but not the doll. It didn't get rid of anything that was in the doll. It was just a deliverance of the house. So Ed said, "You know what? I'll take the doll back with me. I know you girls don't want it." And they said, "No, we don't want it. That's evil." Ed took the doll, put it in the back seat of his car with Lorraine. She was there too. He puts it in the back seat. He's driving home. And as he's driving home, now Ed was a really excellent driver. He's losing control of the wheel. He's driving, and all of a sudden the wheel would be jerking out of his hands, and it's going left, going right. He's having trouble keeping the car on the road, and it was stalling on him. He jumps out of the car. He stops it, jumps out. In his pocket, he always kept holy water in a little bottle. Took out the holy water, sprinkled the holy water in the back seat at Annabelle, and did the sign of the cross over her with his hands, which kind of calmed it down a little bit for a little while. So Ed was able to get the doll home. And he put it in a chair in his museum, not in a case at the time. He put it in a chair. So that is the story of how they acquired Annabelle. But there's a lot of weird things happened. If you got time, but I'll tell you, it may take me another 5 or 6 minutes.
We got 15 minutes. Go ahead.
Okay. He got the doll home, put it in a chair. There was no problem for a little while. But the first problem arose when a priest that knew Ed and Lorraine very well, about 35-year-old priest, called up Lorraine and said, "Hey, Lorraine, can I come in and show you my brand new car I just bought today? I'm pretty happy with it. I want to show it to you." So she says, "Oh, Father, come on over and we'll have lunch." So Father Bill came over to the house, talked to Ed and Lorraine, had lunch. Everything was great. Suddenly the priest says, "Hey, Ed, can I see that doll that I heard put slashes on people? Can I see that thing?" And Ed says, "Oh, yeah, come on downstairs to the museum." Brought Father Bill down, walked them around. They got to the doll. Ed was, like he says to everyone, don't touch anything. It's dangerous to touch anything because your aura can mingle with the aura of some of these evil objects that's infused within them. So the priest is listening to Ed. Ed tells the story just like I did about Annabelle. What was the problem with Annabelle? He got to the part about the slash marks on Lou's chest. As soon as he said the 7 psychic wounds on Lou's chest, the priest, after Ed just admonished him not to do it, he leaned over the little yellow rope that was in front of Annabelle, grabbed Annabelle by both of her arms, lifted her up just like Lou did, threw the doll across the room and said, "God is more powerful than any devil or demon," and threw it, and it landed on the floor. And Ed was like aghast, didn't know what to do. He said, "Father, I just got through telling you not to touch anything, and you had to touch that doll. It's the worst thing." The priest did not want to hear it. He was like, "I don't care. That's nothing to me. It's not dangerous to me. God will protect me, and God is more powerful." And Ed says, "Yeah, Father, you're right. God is more powerful than any devil or demon, but no human being is. No priest is. You really shouldn't have touched the doll like that and challenged it." Well, nothing happened that day. The priest went back upstairs, said his goodbyes to Lorraine and Ed, got back in his brand new car and drove away. Problem was, the priest never got back to his rectory that night. He went almost head on into a tractor-trailer truck on Route 84 and was nearly killed. And the car was absolutely totaled. The priest, fortunately, did not die. He was injured. When the priest was on the mend, he called up Ed, and he was almost crying on the phone to Ed. And he said, "Ed, you want to know something? The last thing I can remember is before the crash was I looked up into the rearview mirror and I could see the doll's face. And then I just lost control of the car." Now, you could argue, was it the doll or was it just the priest lost control? Who knows, but why would you challenge? That's not the end. The cop came to investigate a missing person with Lorraine months later, probably a year or so later. Doll still was not in the case at that time, and he did the same thing. When he came to talk to Lorraine, he said, "Ed, could I see your museum downstairs? I'd like to see the things in there." Ed says, "Yeah, come on down," to the big cop. He's about 6'3", homicide cop. He sits down there, and he's walking around, and Ed says, "Don't touch anything." Starts to talk about things. The phone rings on the wall in the museum. Ed picks it up, covers the receiver, and says, "I got to take this upstairs to the cop. I'll be right back. Don't touch anything." So Ed hangs up the phone, goes upstairs, and leaves the cop alone in the museum. It wasn't 4 or 5 minutes later that Ed hears the cop coming up from the passageway up the staircase to the main room. He could hear pounding sounds on the chair on the stairs, like banging from side to side. He looks down. He sees the cop, white as a ghost, almost sweating like he's having a heart attack. In fact, that's what Ed thought. Ed thought he was having a heart attack. And he said to the cop, sit down. I'll call 911. I'll get an ambulance out here right away." Cop looks at Ed and says, No, Ed. No, it's not that." And he sits down. So Ed says, "What the heck's the matter? What happened?" And the cop's like, I don't want to talk about it. Like a macho cop, Then he looks over at Lorraine, who was just very concerned. And he looks at Lorraine and he says, "But I'll tell Lorraine. But I don't want Lorraine to ever repeat what I'm going to tell her." So Ed says, "No problem. No, go ahead. Go in the other room. Go talk to Lorraine." And Ed ran downstairs into the museum and found out what actually happened without even speaking to Lorraine. All the candelabras were knocked over. The statuary was knocked over. The doll was off the chair on the floor. So Ed told me later, I never learned from Lorraine what the cop had said, but I know what happened. He touched the doll. He touched that doll, and something terrible happened. His aura mingled with the aura of that doll, and something terrible happened with that cop, like a big struggle, and it frightened him. Matter of fact, 3 months later, the cop retired from the police department and moved out to California. Now, was that due to that? I don't know, but why mess with that kind of evil? But that wasn't the worst case. The worst case, Jim, was the last thing I'm going to tell you. when a group of about 14, 15 people, young kids, 18 to 20 years old, college, came to do a private tour with Ed. Ed's walking around the museum. One guy came on a motorcycle with his girlfriend, and they're walking around. At this time now, Ed had put the doll in a glass and wood enclosure so no one could just grab it. And it's sitting there in the enclosure with a light on it. So Ed's starting to talk about the slash marks, just like he did with the priest. He starts to talk about the slash marks on Lou's chest and stomach when this about 18 to 20-year-old kid steps forward out of the line, goes up to the glass of the display case, starts banging on it violently and says, "This is a bunch of BS. If that doll can put a slash on anybody, do it to me right now," challenging the doll, challenging what was there. Ed says, "Hey, you and your girlfriend, leave right now. I can't put up anything like that. That's uncalled for. Get out of here now." Ed was mad. The kid was like mocking. He was leaving, smirking with his girlfriend. "Yeah, honey, this is a bunch of bull. This isn't real." And they leave. 3 hours later, though, the young man did not ever make it home. The young man died 3 hours later. And we found out what happened because the girl didn't die. She was on the back of his motorcycle that he had with him, that he was driving. He was laughing and joking, she said, about the doll when he lost control, went straight head-on into a tree, and was killed instantly. Now, was it the doll? Again, was it the doll that did this? I don't know. I mean, you can never know for sure.
Right.
But, geez, why would you challenge the demonic? A realm that you know nothing about, that you don't know how to fight or deal with. And also, remember, when you challenge the devil doesn't have to listen to you. Like if you said, "Come to me right now," it doesn't have to come when you ask it to. It can come tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. And it doesn't have to come to you. It may want to harm you through your family. It could kill your mother, your father, get your mother in a bad car accident. But you don't attribute it to that because it's like a year later. So you're not even thinking of that. That's how the devil operates. It's insidious. It's cunning. It's clever. And it's smarter than you and me. So why would you ever challenge something that you know absolutely nothing about? It's almost like me saying to you, just jump off that cliff. You're not going to get hurt. Trust me. Yeah, sure. Don't worry. I've done it before. Just jump into the rocks. It'll be okay. You're just doing something you know nothing about. You're going to get hurt. So that's the story of Annabelle.
Wow. And before I forget, the song we listened to on halftime was "Spirits on the Hill" by Frank Chiafari. And you could go to Frank's website at frankchiafari.com. That's Frank, CHIAFARI.com for more information. And please visit warrens.net to learn about the online classes and the upcoming events and anything else Warrens. Frank!
Right.
Yes.
What was the most memorable case that you investigated with the group?
Okay, you know what? Ironically, it was the first case I was ever on in 1991. Ed took me to, I think it was outside of New Haven, and it was a normal house when you walk in, nothing extraordinarily, out of the way, or you'd think, what's going on here? It was a typical normal home, and it was a heavy poltergeist case. I mean, things were moving off the shelves. I've never seen anything like it before or after. Chairs would be moving. This little girl's hair would be pulled. Ed would be communicating with this entity saying, bang, once for yes, twice for no. And the sound would come all around the room. And I was like, this changed my feeling on, like, everything.
Your first case.
Yeah, I never had it since. It was like the most amazing, intense case I was on.
Wow. And
was that the one where the table moved?
Yeah, the table. It's on YouTube, and it saddens me because people say it's phony when they see it. And I go, I was there. It wasn't phony.
Yeah, I have the tape. Yeah, that was crazy. I was there. I have the tape. And the woman, the girl, and her head was moving, and the chair was moving. The chair was going up and down when she was sitting in it and stuff. Yeah.
Incredible. The battery would drain on me. Ed told me, make sure you have a new battery when you're here. It drained within 5 minutes. I had to plug it into the wall. And I was like, wow, this stuff is real. Because I always believed it, but you get a little skeptical, and when you see it for yourself, you go, that's it, man, it is real. You can't, no one's going to convince you otherwise.
All right, I found that on the YouTube already. Just search table moving poltergeist Warrens, and it pops right up.
And if you see, my head is chopped off. I'm standing there with a leather jacket by the table. You can't see my face. That's me standing there. And people are giving derogatory comments. This is all phony. And I'm saying, no, it was real. It's too good to be real, but it really is real.
Wow.
Yeah, that's the problem, Jim, is you got a lot of skeptics out there who just don't know their ABCs, in other words, and they're like they're just blowing hot air because something they don't understand. It's almost like Columbus saying the Earth, or people saying the Earth was flat because they didn't know any better. People who don't know any better because they haven't experienced it, and we've experienced it because we're involved in this kind of realm. In other words, like how many civilian people out there have ever gone and investigated a burglary? You don't, unless you're a cop. How many people investigated or saw a murder happen? Hardly anybody, unless you're a cop. So it's like, if you're involved in that kind of work, you're going to see it. So we know it's there because we get called to it, So we know it's there. We don't actually go seeking it out. It seeks us out. And people who just say, that's a bunch of bunk, because there are these people sitting in their chair at home in their computer, reading comic books, having Reese's peanut butter cups and getting pimples, saying that that stuff's not real because they have nothing better to do, or they're skeptics because they don't believe in a higher power. They don't.
And Tony, what about the Enfield case? People are actually saying that Ed and Lorraine were never even there.
Right. They're saying that because they read something if one person says it, it must be true. It's in writing. It must be true. People got to get off of this kick that if it's in the paper, if it's on TV, if it's in writing, if somebody relates it on TV, it's real, it's true. Not true. No. And to be honest with you, it happens a lot where people say, "Oh, that was a hoax." Amityville is a hoax because I read that the people there now are not haunted. Well, that's a different situation. Not everybody's haunted. It could be the house itself. It could be the person that was haunted at that location that the spirit was attracted to, because people don't know what they're talking about. So the Enfield case was real. I have hours and hours, probably 5 or 6 hours of audio interviews by Ed Warren talking to Janet, Margaret, Peggy Hodgson about it, and hearing the spirit voices coming from thin air while they're talking, and they're communicating back and forth with Ed. And I have slides, about 40 or 50 slides of the house taken back in 1979, and Ed's in the house talking to the girls. What more do they want? And these idiots say that, he wasn't there because I read one line somewhere that said he wasn't there. Yes, he was, and so was Lorraine, and so was Frank. Frank went there.
Ed took me to the house,
and my wife was there.
Yeah, and it was definitely true. People recognized them. They were friends. That's funk, when people say that.
Yeah, so people especially people who don't believe in God, I don't even listen to them. People who say, well, there's no such thing as ghosts. The first question you should ask if you're a paranormal investigator and you're real is to say, oh, you don't believe in ghosts? Well, do you believe in God? And watch them squirm, because they're going to say, oh, that doesn't have anything to do with ghosts. Well, that doesn't have anything to do with what we're talking about. Yes, it does. It has everything to do with it, because a ghost is a spirit, and a spirit is created by the supernatural being who is also a spirit called God. So if you don't believe in God, then how can you believe in a ghost or a devil? You can't. So you're just an atheist. So get out of my way. Just leave, that kind of thing. And they used to say, he never met an atheist in a haunted house. Because once the house gets haunted, you don't have an answer. You
believe.
Fight it with your fist,
Yeah. And that's a perfect way to end. We're out of time, unfortunately. Thank you, Frank. Thank you, Tony. Visit warrens.net and frankchiafari.com. And see you next week, guys. Thank you for joining me.
You got it.
Thank you, Jim. We'll see you next week.
All right, good night, guys.
Twizzler.
All right. Bye.
Talk to you later. Bye-bye. Bye.